And remember, Christianity was born under the Roman Empire. So that's the culture in which it's swimming. And about 100 years before we think this letter was written, Roman emperors started something of a family values campaign. Rome was going through this violent and not very comfortable transition from republic to empire. And so the emperors, through the first century, needed something to shore up their power and to distract from their shenanigans. So they idealized an earlier Rome and played on nostalgia for a bygone Rome, a more virtuous Rome, a Rome where everybody knew their place and life was easier. And that ideology that they're pushing goes back to ancient Roman virtues, teaching that the man is the head of the household legally as well as morally, and that a pious, good religious household is going to be known by the order the male head of household keeps. And that doesn't mean running a smooth household. The male head of household legally owned his wife, his daughters, his slaves, and any son who had not come of age. So a good religious Roman household is going to have the man at the top in a clear authoritative role, keeping good order in his household, as a microcosm of the empire, where we have the Roman emperor, who is a benevolent, devout, pious father figure who is keeping his empire in good order. That's the ideology that is creeping in here. But does it mean that this is actually how people lived? Or is this a story of how people wanted people to live, of how the powers that be wanted people to live? Or is it really how they wanted them to live at all, but rather a story they wanted them to buy into to keep control? I don't want to go down the conspiracy theory route, but you can see how a story, if you get enough people to buy into it, will keep everyone looking in a particular direction. So if this is the story of how the empire wanted people to live, I wonder if it's like our story today of what it is to be a good citizen. Not a good citizen of Canada, but a good citizen of culture. Is this like our story of how a good citizen is trim, lean, eats in accordance with insert lifestyle here, has the work-life balance figured out, lives in perpetual family harmony, is endlessly productive, always organized, in control of their money, and never, ever tired? And if I've just described your life, please do not tell me. But you can see it, right? That story, we're all pulled to that story. Even if as I read it, I can feel something in me saying, ooh, yeah, I should be more like that. It's hard to let go of story. And that's one of the challenges about being called to this tension of living both in the world and following Christ. And the other question we have to ask of this Roman social ideology is this congruent with how Jesus behaved towards women? I would say no. Now, Jesus never explicitly talked about the role of women in church, but then Jesus didn't have a church. But Jesus spoke to women. That's a big deal in a patriarchal society. He listened to women. He ate with them. That is such a big deal in his culture. He healed them, called them daughter. He taught them and was taught by them. There was a place at the table of Jesus for women. Now, it'd be really easy to end here, right? Boom, done, women are fine. Next. And I don't know about you, but oh Lord, my temptation is to pat myself on the back for belonging to a denomination that has got it right. Thank you very much. But that misses the deeper message of this text. It's really obvious in this 2,000-year-old text how the teeter-totter world of Christ, the teeter-totter of world and Christ, is out of balance. But the Christ who sits at one end of our teeter-totter is among us, both to comfort and to challenge. And the challenge of this text is to ask us to take a good, hard look in the mirror and ask how we may be out of balance. When have we sat comfortably within the world, leaving Christ hanging in the air? And it's hard to see because we are shaped by our world, right? Those stories are in our DNA. So I tried to think of an example from my own life. And here's what I thought of. Oreos. Stay with me. So Oreos, like many foods that are designed for a long shelf life, contain palm oil. And the harvesting of palm oil in its current practice, by and large, is environmentally degrading and employs vulnerable workers in third world countries with poor conditions for inadequate pay. I know all this. I know the sweat and labor and devastated Amazon that goes into my Oreos. And I feel like it's a pretty clear message from Jesus and his Hebrew prophets. But I live in a consumer culture where I deserve to have whatever I want because I want it, and because the economy depends on us all buying what we want. So do I need Oreos? Nope. Do I want them? Oh yes. Am I going to stop buying them? And that's a trivial example, but it's a microcosm of the larger questions and challenges that we face every day being a citizen of both our world and the kingdom of God. On a larger scale, our heritage, my own heritage as someone born in England, British Christianity built a myth that English culture was synonymous with Christianity and was superior in every way to all the heathen, noble, misguided savages they came across. And we know where that landed us. We know how far that story took us off the path of God's ways. This is the challenge of this passage. We cannot be complacent about what it means to follow Jesus. That's the challenge, but there's always comfort. And so I think the comfort of this passage is how Micah speaks to us, how Micah speaks to this passage. The comfort, when we look at this passage, is that we are walking with God, and we can trust. We can trust God's radical, irrepressible, unstinting, unending grace that catches us every time we land too heavily in the world. Micah, the Hebrew prophet, writing centuries, possibly millennia before Timothy, Micah writes that we are called to walk humbly with our God. Our God is a relational, active God, not hovering above, not distant on high, judging, but right here, right now, right among us. It's that grace that we can trust. And grace is not the statement that, well, you know what, it's okay. Don't worry about it. You meant well, forget about it, it's all good. That's a cheap grace, because real grace sees us as we are. Real grace is when we see what we have done, what we have left undone, the mistakes we have made, the harm we have caused, and we are hunkering down in shame and unworthiness, and it is then that God comes to us looks us in the eye and says, I see you. I see you in all your glory and all your shame. And I love you. In this moment, in this valley of darkness, I love you, and you are my child. Leave your shame behind and come walk with me. That's the grace we can trust. And so we're left with two questions. Can we stand naked before God and accept the challenge of this passage, the challenge to see where we confuse the world's story with Christ's story? And, which is even harder, can we stand naked before God and receive the grace that is poured out upon us? Neither of them are easy. But, my friends, what else is there to live for? Amen.